In this video I'm showing you a coloring technique, a face framing, which I did with 14 foils. This coloring technique goes with the cutting technique that's also on YouTube. I want my color as light as possible, so I use Snow White from Kiss together with 9% and prepare it 1 to 2. Here I'm adding the No Yellow Pro Booster, which is a blue purple pigment that I can add extra to my bleach. This reduces the final yellow pigment and results in a lighter, cooler tone in my color. Be sure to add a maximum of 2% at a level 7 height and a maximum of 8% at a level 1 height. Don't go over it, rather a bit less, because otherwise your color might turn a bit bluish and we don't want that. First I section off the hair before applying the color. I'm taking a middle part on top, I'm making a parting from the top of the head, just behind the ear, and you also saw a parting at the occipital bone. Then I start at the front, because that's where I want it to be the lightest. I make a diagonal parting and ensure some natural hair falls over my face framing. As you can see, my pass is quite thick and I do the same with hands. I don't take too thin sections because I want a bit of naturalness to remain. I place a foil on my collar and do that on the right side because of that. I can easily turn that on against the head and then I apply the Snow White onto my foil. So I'm sure that the underside of my pass is covered. Also in English, I work on towel dried hair because I want to blend that color towards the scalp. Don't press too hard with your bleach, because just as I mentioned, I want there to be a bit of natural in it, because that gives a softer effect. Always blend the bleach out gently towards the roots, so I don't get a hard line in my final results. Wrap your foil nicely and then you can move on to the sides. When I move sideways, I'll also grab a diagonal passe again. Don't be afraid to take a thick section now, because as I mentioned, the natural hair should stay in. The big advantage of diagonal passes is that the bleach remains soft in the hair. Once I start working with vertical sections, I really get lines, I get a spot, a stripe in the hair. When I start working with horizontal sections, I get more of a panel in the hair. So I work with diagonal partitions and all my foils will be placed diagonally as well. Work with the color board so your gloves don't get colored every time. And you work very neatly and quickly. I've now worked with 9%, but always pay attention to the hair quality of your client, and if 9% is not permitted, then work with 6% because hair quality always comes first. If you're worried that the hair is very fragile, you can always add an extra Carabond. It protects the hair from damage during the bleaching process. But I work at full throttle, so it's not necessary then. And when you add developer, then prepare the mixture 1 to 1. I want my bleaching process to be even, so after I've applied the two on the sides, I'm moving to the other side. So it progresses evenly, not that I move onto the party in the neck. I will do that later. I'm now placing these two foils at the front as well. Here too, work diagonally and always make sure the natural hair nicely covers the bleached part. When I'm bleaching, I always work on towel dried hair. It actually has two advantages. The first advantage is that the water is alkaline, so it opens up a little bit in the hair. Plus, it's much easier to blend the color so you don't get any hard lines. And your product is evenly absorbed into the hair. It also happens that the customer wants the rest of the hair colored outside this face framing. Well, then I would recommend taking a thinner pass for your bleaching. Then a pass of natural hair in between and then another thin pass with bleach. Because this way you can ensure that is, during your bleaching process, simultaneously apply the rest of the hair in your collar, so you don't have to do two color treatments on the customer at the salon. but that everything can be deployed simultaneously at once. Imagine that you are now working in some fine hair, then you could also opt for it, to thin out the hair a bit more, so you're not grabbing whole locks, but rather doing more of a weave. Be mindful, if your weave is very fine, it will blend into the rest of the hair. So you need to maintain a somewhat coarser weave for incorporation, to set, because that is also a possibility you can do in wasvinenhak. Once I have incorporated both side sections, I move on to the nape area. Here too I work with diagonal sections. You see here the department in the neck area. These are 2 diagonal passes that you then apply. Now I have chosen for face framing, and as I already told you, with 14 foils, so it is quickly inserted. But would you also like to see highlights on top of the hair? Is that possible? Then you would just do 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 extra foils had to be added, so then you have a complete coloring. With 19 passes you have it. But because right now we're seeing a lot of face framing, I've opted for this coloring technique. So pay attention when you work with these passes or with this coloring technique, that you pick somewhat coarser passes from a normal hair thickness. First bleach on the foil until the color at the bottom matches the top. Silk taken becomes that you then become the blonde gentleman. Apply it on top of your section, and you don't press too hard so that some naturalness remains. Wow, a little foil. Make sure it all looks neat for the customer and you walk all the way around, walking along. After I've done the bottom, I go back to the side, and here you see I also applied the diagonal parting so that it moves beautifully in his hair, the coloring. You can blend the color in different ways from the ends to your roots. I choose to turn my brush in the opposite direction with a little product to let it flow back up. I sometimes use my pinky thinking, oh, it needs a bit more blending there. Or you use your brush in a horizontal motion, and this way you gently work towards the root. I'm leaving about 1 inch or 2 inches now. I like the root touch-up. I like it that way. I personally find it nicer than when I put it all the way against the root. To bleach, because then I'll also get that harsh line again, and I don't want to see it. I never use heat when I go to lighten. Sometimes I still see it happening in salons that they use heat, but when I use heat I blow up the color and I always remain with more yellow pigments than when I work, with warmth of regret. With bleaching it's just a matter of patience. Now I'm moving to my last pass on top. It also falls diagonally, the other side than the underlying passé, and then I'm sure now at the top that I have nature left that falls nicely over it. But if you want some highlights on top, then you put another foil in the opposite diagonal direction on top. And that can be a whole lock, or you can choose to tease it out. That's up to you. Make sure to neatly section the hair before coloring. Have all your stuff ready so you can keep going without stopping. Then I have this color technique in 20-25 minutes. I have it in there. If I were to color the rest of the hair, it would take an extra 15 minutes. But it's a quick technique you can use in the salon for coloring. I'll do the same on the other side. Once both top sides are done, I head back to the back. And as you can see, I'm working diagonally again. I often still see bleaching powder being prepared by hand. But my advice is always to prepare it with a scale to ensure the right proportions and when your product is available to buy. And a colleague should prepare it extra for you so that you get the exact same ratio. That you also get the exact same lightening. This coloring technique matches beautifully with the cutting technique I've applied. You can also find this cutting technique on my YouTube channel. It's the cutting technique, that the hair falls into a point with layering, and that layering also falls into a point. Just like with the cutting technique, this coloring technique is also suitable for medium to long hair. Then I have reached the last two sections on the back of the head, and as you can see, there is still plenty of natural hair left, so that I can still in my face framing or with my highlight at the back remaining nicely under the natural. But if I want to work on it a bit more, that's certainly possible as long as you stay diagonal. After a development time of 30 minutes, I rinsed it out. All I did was wash it again with the No Yellow Kiss shampoo to make it as cool a final result as possible. The great thing about this shampoo is that you can also give it to the customer for home use, that the scent remains nicely cool and that it doesn't turn yellow. Here I'll show you that you still have natural hair in between. Normally you wouldn't want that, but it's necessary with this technique. Here's the final result. Technology to transfer to your customer in the salon with 14 foils. I say good luck to everyone.